Welcome back to another episode of the Two Christian Dudes podcast. We're so excited to introduce a new guest to you today. His name is Howard Storm. He's got a powerful testimony. He'll be sharing about his near-death experience, or as Randy might say, his afterlife experience. So give me just a moment, and I'll bring both of those fine gentlemen into the conversation. Randy, Howard, welcome to this episode. I'm excited to see where our conversation goes today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Howard, for joining us. You know, this is going to be an exciting time together because I wanted to talk to you for a long time. We have a mutual friend, John Burke, who wrote Imagine Heaven. And then you actually have a distinguished career. You had been a professor, an art professor, and you have painted some stellar pieces of artwork. You have taught within the university. You have been a pastor for a church in Kentucky and recently retired from that. You've authored numerous books, and we'll get to talk about maybe one or two of those. And then you've been interviewed. I was mentioning to you, I saw you on, I think, Amazon it was. You've been on, Oprah Winfrey, all over the place and being interviewed about your story. And one thing that we talked about as we were beginning the show is that neither of us really were believers in Jesus Christ. But when I had my afterlife experience, I was a believer, but not the case with you, Howard. You were not a believer in Christ. So tell us a little bit about, briefly how your experience, but also where you were before your encounter with the afterlife.
I grew up in I was born in 46, so I grew up in the primarily 50s and 60s, a really interesting time of great cultural change. Went to Sunday school as a child and was very enthusiastic about it because of the dysfunctional family situation. As an early teenager, decided that church was a bunch of hypocrites, wasn't real what they were saying, and I became a materialist. My interest went towards, if it's not tangible, if it's not visible, it doesn't exist. There's no supernatural thing in the world. And so I excluded God, started reading with Camus, then Jean-Paul Sartre and Martin Heidegger and stuff, and became a committed atheist, and went to college at the age of 17 and took a philosophy class, and that professor was an atheist and became quite confirmed in those beliefs. Hardcore.
Are hardcore atheists, and you have this experience, and yours happened to be, I believe, in Paris, France.
That's right.
And you had a devastating encounter with that required a surgical intervention. So tell us a little bit about that and what led up to your near death, please.
At 11 o'clock in the morning on June 1st, 1985, my small stomach perforated, which means that the digestive juices, large part of that is hydrochloric acid, bacteria, and all that good stuff, burst through the wall of my small stomach into my abdominal cavity. And the pain was way over the top, more than anything I'd ever experienced in my life, dropped me to the floor kicking and screaming. I was taken to the big city hospital in Paris, examined by two doctors there, told me that if I didn't have surgery within the hour, I would die. And they sent me from emergency over to the surgical hospital. But unfortunately, there was no surgeon available because it was a Saturday. And they parked me in a room. I was given no medication. I was given nothing, including no pillow, no blanket, no top sheet, nothing. And laid on a bed and waiting for a doctor to appear at the hospital. This began at 11 o'clock in the morning. I was in the surgical hospital before noon, and at 8:30 that night, nurse came in and said she was sorry. They were unable to locate a doctor, and they would try and get one the next day. every doctor I've spoken to, and I've talked to many of them, told me that my life expectancy was a few hours at best, and that I should not be alive having spent all that time in that treatment, because the whole abdominal cavity is being destroyed. Not only are you becoming extremely septic, but also the digestive juices are beginning to digest your organs. So the pain, which was so severe that it knocked me to the ground, thrashing and screaming and cussing and in terror, had only gotten much worse during those hours. And when the nurse said there was going to be no doctor, I hadn't seen a doctor. I knew there was time for me to stop fighting, because I knew that when you die, you're dead. It's like turn a light switch and the light goes off. When you die, no more activity, you're gone, and there's no more to you. Said goodbye to my wife, and I went unconscious.
You know, that as scary as that is, you're at the cusp of death at that point. And so, having read your books, and also having seen you talk about your experience, at what point did you then enter into what we were calling your afterlife encounter? What happened, and how did you transition to that place?
There was no transition. I went unconscious, and the next thing I knew, I was standing up next to the bed, and I felt better than I'd ever felt in my entire life. And I was so happy, so ecstatically happy, because I went from the worst pain I'd ever experienced in my life for hours, and then all of a sudden felt great. I also noticed that my senses were heightened. I could see, hear, taste, feel, touch much better than I'd ever before in my life. And I thought this is pretty amazing. I'm not just better, I'm better than better. And I tried to communicate with my wife and my roommate, who, from my point of view, were ignoring me. From their point of view, they didn't know I was standing next to the bed, yelling and screaming at them. And I was very angry that they would not respond to me, because I was not aware that they didn't perceive me. And a group of people began calling me by name outside the room, and I went over to the doorway and I told them that I was sick. I needed a doctor. I'm supposed to have surgery. And they said, "We know all about you. We've been waiting for you a long time. It's time for you to go." So I assumed that they were hospital people to take me to the doctor. And I left the room and went out into the dark hallway and followed them on a very, very long journey into ever increasing darkness. As we walked, they became more rude and crude and abusive. And I realized that I'd made a huge mistake going with these people. And I told them, when we were in abject darkness, I said, "I'm not going with you any further. I'm going back," which was a bluff, because I didn't know which way was back. But I just wanted to get away from them. And when I did that, they began to fight with me. First, shoving and kicking, and then punching, and then biting, and then tearing and gouging, and then doing things that I don't talk about that were very invasive. And it hurt a lot. And eventually I was all ripped up and laying on the ground of that place, unable to move, and I was no longer of any amusement to them whatsoever. And I heard a voice say, "Pray to God." And I thought, I don't pray. I don't believe in God. And the voice said, "Pray to God." And I thought, I don't know how to pray. I couldn't pray if I wanted to. And the voice said, "Pray to God." And I tried to think back to my childhood, and I remembered a couple phrases that I had learned as a child from the Lord's Prayer in the 23rd Psalm. And when I said them, the people around me became very angry, and they were saying to me in extremely obscene language that there is no God, nobody can hear me, and that they were going to do much worse things to me if I didn't stop praying. But I also realized immediately that my prayers were so repugnant to them that they were backing away from me, backing away deeper into the darkness. So I kept making up stuff about God, very crude, stupid prayers, but all prayer is good ultimately. And they eventually left me alone. And in that time, I got to think about my life. And my conclusion was I had no idea why I had been born, why I had lived the life that I had, and what was the purpose of the meaning of life. It was just like a complete mystery to me.
Would you, Howard, the encounter with these beings who are doing terrible, horrendous things to you, do you now look back on that as an encounter with demons?
No, absolutely not. There were, I knew absolutely that they were not literally, spiritually, they were my soulmates, my friends. These were the people that I hung out with that affirmed my beliefs.
And the belief at that time was counter to Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior.
Yeah, we mocked Christianity a lot. That was one of our favorite targets of sarcasm and mockery.
Yes. So at what point then, having had this encounter and you prayed out to God, so you prayed out to God and then what happened?
So in this self-analysis that I did and came to the conclusion that I was where I belonged, that this was where I was going to be forever and ever. But it was a horrible thought that I was stuck in this place. And as I sank into that despair of complete hopelessness, my mind went back to my childhood in a Sunday school classroom singing "Jesus Loves Me." And I could see it and I could hear it in my imagination. And most importantly, I could feel it, that there was this, and I don't mean any disrespect for this, but there was this Superman guy, this cool guy who was my buddy named Jesus. When I was a little boy and I was afraid or had a nightmare at night or something like that, I would pray to him and he would make things right. He took care of me. And I needed somebody like that now. And so I called out to him and I called out into the darkness, "Jesus, please save me." And to my complete surprise, he came surrounded in brilliant white light. His hands and arms reached down from this incredibly brilliant white light and touched me. And I was made whole and filled with love, which is indescribable because there's nothing comparable to his love in this world. So even the word love is inadequate to describe how he loves us. And his hands went behind my back and he picked me up and held me tight against him. And he was holding me very close. I was weeping for joy in his chest. And then I realized that we were traveling directly upward, going faster and faster. And as I tried to get my composure and take a look at our destination, I realized that we were headed towards a world of beings of light. And it's huge. And I realized that we were going to where God was. And at that, I had a thought. He's made a terrible mistake. I don't belong here. He should put me back where he found me.
Howard, in terms of when Jesus embraced you, picked you up, did the pain, the torment you were feeling, did that dissipate in an instance?
Yeah.
What transition there?
Yeah, it was. The pain was filled with an ecstasy of love, of being loved. And I just want to add that not only did I feel loved, I felt known. You know, it's like when you go home and there's your mother, your father, your sisters, your brothers, your family, and it's like you can kind of relax a little bit because like you can be who you are. You don't have to
Right.
put on, any act for anybody.
You're where you belong.
Yeah. Well, being with Jesus is where we all belong because he knows us.
And in terms of I want to go back a little bit earlier in your story, in terms of the people or beings, whatever you want to call them, in the hallway calling you out of your hospital room. As you followed along with those folks, did you see a light you were going towards? Was it a tunnel? Because you talked about you end up in a place of kind of utter darkness. So what was that transition experience like?
Well, I pretty soon, walking with them, realized that there were no walls, no ceiling, just a surface that we were walking on. And it went from gray to darker and darker and darker. And, I'm thinking there's something very wrong with this picture because like I'm on the third floor of a hospital and it's not that big. You can't walk for miles and miles. We were walking for miles and you can't walk for miles and never encounter a stairwell or a wall or anything. And so it was, I was getting very, very concerned about this is irrational.
Now you're a thinking person, Howard. Always the academically inclined. You've taught in the academic setting. So, what your mindset as you're going through this versus how you assimilate information, let's say in the world prior as an atheist, how was that changing, or how did it change through those circumstances?
I was being exposed to a reality that I had no knowledge of and no belief in existed. There's the reality of the physical universe that we live in and we all have in common, and we call that reality. It's what we are, the experiences that we share in this world. But there is a greater reality, a much bigger and more important reality that our physical universe is just a little subset of. And I had left the physical universe and gone into this greater reality. And I was trying to figure it out, which was pretty hopeless because, everything was a whole new ball game.
And then the ball game changed, didn't it? Because at some point, you had been in the presence of Jesus Christ, encountering God from this point of desperation. And then what happened as you came back? And I have to say this caveat, studying you a little bit, Howard, is that you have described yourself as not being a terribly kind person, I think, if that's fair, going into this. So obviously you've changed dramatically. So what happened following this very ethereal encounter?
Immediately when after this experience and Jesus sent me back into the body, into the bed, the nurse came back into the room at 9:00 that night and said, the doctor's coming, we're going to give you the surgery. So I was prepped for the surgery and had the surgery at 10:00. And next morning when I woke from the surgery, I knew that the most important thing in my life had happened to me. I know this sounds strange, but I feel like it was more important than being born, because I felt like I finally, because of the things that Jesus showed me and told me and taught me patiently and kindly, that I finally knew what life was about and what my life was about. And so the big problem was, where do I begin? Because eventually I'm going to get well and I'm going to go home and go back to my job and my family, and what do I do? And it was reevaluating everything from top to bottom.
Well, I actually want to back us up just a moment, Howard. When you encountered Jesus, he took you through some sort of a life review, and you got some kind of a perspective on, as we make choices, as we go through life, how that impacts Jesus and the angels, and I guess we could say the impact that our actions here on earth have in heaven. I feel like that's a real important part of your story. Share a little bit of that with us.
Yeah, they showed me my life in chronological order, not every moment of my life, but everything that they felt was worth learning from. And to summarize it, what they wanted to see me do was to be compassionate, to care about other people. And being a alpha male, my concern was my own welfare and not other people's welfare. But I was socialized enough growing up in Massachusetts that I had social skills, so I could act politely and pretend to be kind and interested in other people. But in fact, I wasn't. I didn't care for other people very much. And I was only really particularly interested in them if they could do something for my benefit, and completely uninterested in them if they could not. So this hurt Jesus and it hurt the angels, and they very much disapproved of the way I was leading my life. The other thing was that all of my accomplishments, like honors, awards, promotions, successes, achievements, they had complete lack of interest in, total lack of interest in. I'd say, but like I strove all my life to accomplish that. And they'd say, that's not important. That's nothing. Let's see how you treated your sister, your wife, your kids, your students. And then we would watch a scene where I would treat them, because not only did we get to see these things, but I also got to see how I felt and how the people felt by the way I had acted towards them.
That in itself, I would imagine, had such a transformative effect on you, because you had, in retrospect, looked at, you were basically told that you needed to treat people more kindly, more generously. But how do you change the have to the want to? I mean, there's one thing we're all told, be nice to your brother or sister or your friend or whomever. But that's hard to do from a disciplinary action. How did that change your heart then to the point where you were that person who wanted to be kind, wanted to be generous and loving?
Well, I'd like to say, so my experience was 35 years ago, 85 till today. And I'm still working on trying to be more kind, more compassionate, more caring. But when I asked Jesus what my job was, when I come back to this world, he said, love the person that you're with. So I try and focus on the person that I'm with, that I'm interacting with, whether it's in person or on the phone or, through the computer, whatever. I try and listen carefully and to be there for them. One thing I learned as a pastor, and I did that for 30 years, is you can't fix anybody. You can't change anybody. All you can do is respond to them in the way that's appropriate given that situation, in the way that they are seeking help or not seeking your help.
Yeah, so you came back actually after this, and what was curious, what was the first thing you said or did after, and if you could just briefly mention, how did you come back? How were you returned? So you're in this place, and what was the transition for you?
No transition. It was like blam, with Jesus in bliss, in ecstasy, back into the body. He told me that's how it was going to be, so I wasn't surprised. And then immediately the nurse came in and said, a doctor has arrived, and they started prepping me for the surgery. But first person I talked to after the experience, which was on Sunday morning when my wife came to see me in the recovery area. She came into the room and I said to her, it's all love. And she said, I love you. And I said, yeah, I know, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about it's all love. And she said, well, there are a lot of people that love you. And I said, I know, but I'm not talking about that kind of love. I'm talking about a huge ocean of love. And you have to let go and dive into the ocean and be part of that love. And she said, you need to go back to sleep. You're talking crazy. And I cried.
Mm-hmm. She wasn't you, that man. No. Sean, what's your take on this?
In terms of the love that you experienced, especially with Jesus, was it like the atmosphere? Like I've heard people describe who've had afterlife, near-death experiences, where just like love is in the air. Like there's the love so permeated everything. It was like undeniable. Was that your experience as well?
Oh, absolutely. Heaven is definitely where anybody would prefer to be. And heaven is where we all belong. And we were all created to go to heaven if we so choose. We can, if we choose God and choose God's way of love, which is perfectly illustrated in the gospel of Jesus Christ and in the Bible, we will go to heaven. And if we choose not to go to heaven, we won't go there. And I can guarantee you the people are not going to like the alternative to heaven. It's no fun.
And in terms of your experience in heaven, did you have a sense that you didn't want to go back?
Oh, very much so. I had a big argument with Jesus, and by argument, I don't mean we weren't name calling or anything. I was just trying to persuade him to let me be a part of heaven, and he was assuring me that I did not have the character to fit into heaven at this point, and that's why I need to come back to develop more of a person, become more of a person that would be part of heaven, which is being a kind and loving person. So I'm working on my qualifications.
A student of love.
Yeah.
Our experiences are similar in some ways and different in other ways, Howard. I can empathize with your encounter with Jesus Christ and the aspect of love, because love to us is an ethereal kind of conveyance of an emotion or an action, but love as a person, the person of Jesus Christ, is quite different. And do you think there are any words in the lexicons of all of the world really to adequately describe what that is? Is that for you hard as it has been for me to grapple with the concept of expressing to others just the fullness of God's love?
Well, one of the things I value about my theological education was we did a lot of word studies, and love can be used as a noun, but it's also, I think, much more powerful as a verb. And one of the best descriptions of love that exists in the entire literature of all human history is Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 13, verses 1 through 13, often referred to as the love chapter. And although it's exceedingly difficult to define love, Paul does as good a job as anybody did, where he talks about love is kind, love is patient, love is never rude, never self-seeking. And when we think about love as an action rather than a sentiment or a feeling, forget about it as a feeling. You can be loving and not feeling it. You can be kind and unselfish and not feel that. It doesn't matter what you feel. Forget your feelings. Throw the feeling part out. I mean, it's nice when you feel love. That's great. But sometimes we need to be disciplined enough to act and be loving even when we're not feeling it. I've done some prison ministry, and when I first went to the prison and was dealing with these hardcore guys, I was terrified, frankly. I was afraid of them. I wasn't feeling any love at all. I was like, I was in fight or flight mode. Fortunately, there were guards in the room, and I could always get me out of here. But by the end of the week with those guys, we were hugging and telling each other we loved each other. These are some bad boys,
Yeah, you could have had another near-death experience or permanent death experience.
Yeah.
It's why do you think, and we're doing this series on near-death experiences or afterlife experiences, why do you think it's important that people hear about our experiences? And what is God doing through them? I mean, there's a lot of questions, are they real? Are they not real?
Yeah.
All of those things. Why do you think this is important to share?
I'm really glad you asked that question, because I think it's extremely important. I think that we're in a critical time in history. Of course, people have been believing they were in the critical time of history for thousands of years, but I really think that there's a lot of signs that this is the birth pangs of the coming of Christ. It's time for people to get ready. It's time for people to get serious about not just their salvation, but the salvation of the world and everyone that we come in contact with. So I think one of the ways that God is nurturing this is in our age of, quote, enlightenment, which I think is a misnomer, but anyways, we live in a time, it's like if you can't test it, if you can't observe it, it has no reality. It's not true. Religion's just hypothetical, and like, who can believe in any of that stuff because you can't prove any of it. Well, millions of people, and there have been surveys done all over the world, are having near-death experiences. Millions, tens of millions in the US alone. And these people are coming back and saying, excuse me, it's real. This stuff is true. There really is an afterlife. There really is a God. There really is a plan. There really is a path to God, to heaven. Get serious. And not a lot, but a significant percentage of people have had experiences of both heaven and hell. And I know that it's very unpopular to talk about hell, and like, people want to dismiss that and say, oh, everybody goes to heaven. It doesn't matter what you do with your life. Do whatever you want to do. We're all going to heaven. That's not true. That's absolutely not true. God is a God of love, and God is a God of justice. And the bottom line is everybody gets exactly what they want from their heart, not what they say. I mean, I could tell you I'd like to win the lottery. The only problem is I don't buy any lottery tickets, so I haven't won the lottery. I mean, I'd like to be a multimillionaire, sure, but I mean, I don't do anything about it. So that's baloney. What I just said's all a whole bunch of baloney. I mean, it doesn't mean anything. What I do is, how do I treat the beggar at the grocery store? That's what matters. That matters. That's everything right there. And I use the beggar at the grocery store because it's someone I come in contact several times with, different beggars. How do I treat the cashier, the shopkeeper, the person that waits on me? How do I treat the stranger? How do I treat my family? How do I treat my friends? How do I treat the people that ask me for advice or help? That's what matters.
And Howard, in terms of sharing your story, sharing about your experience, were you able to do that soon after the experience, or I know other people who didn't feel like they had a release, or they were afraid to share it for what people might think. So what was it like to getting to a place of confidence where you actually were ready to share about this experience?
I was crazy, wildly enthusiastic to share it with everybody, that every nurse, every doctor, every family member, every visitor, cleaning lady, respiratory therapist, you name it. I wanted to tell them about God and Jesus and